All right, joining us now from Sports Illustrated's Conor Orr. You can catch him on Twitter at Conor Orr, doing a ton of good feature writing for SI.com on all things NFL. And of course, with free agency fully underway here on a Wednesday, we'll be airing on a Thursday. Things are changing by the second, but one thing that's been pretty consistent is Jon Gruden never really finding his footing. And so this morning, Conor, when I, woke up, flipped open the phone, started going through stuff, and I saw the headline, "What exactly is Jon Gruden's plan for the Raiders?" I thought you were talking to me, and I didn't have an answer, Conor.
Yeah, I've been vocally critical of the hire since day one, and I understand that I've developed a bit of a reputation as a Gruden naysayer, and I will counter that by saying that I did write some nice things about him at the beginning of this year. I did think that, or last season, where I did think we saw some of the schematic talent coming out for the first time, probably during his tenure in Oakland and Las Vegas. And I was like, okay, this is the guy that they hired. This is the guy that's been cooped up in the film room and all the feature stories that we've heard about. This is the product of that. But since then, it's just been really destructive managerial decisions. He tore down a good roster that was in place, tried to rebuild it, and is now in the process of tearing down that rebuild, which I guess is something that you can do when you have a 10-year contract. But any other coach at this point with that record would have been fired. And I would argue that they would have been fired before last season too. I mean, if you look at the lifespan of these coaches right now. So it's an interesting place to be.
Yeah, I think the friendship that Mark Davis has with Jon Gruden plays obviously a huge part in it. I mean, that's basically why he became $100 million coach, was for that reason. And I think the big thing too was, he got hired the year before they moved to Vegas, new stadium, new market. Let's open up. Let's be big. Let's be sexy. Like, the billboards in Vegas weren't Derek Carr, Rodney Hudson. It was of Jon Gruden. So he was kind of like, the motivation was a celebrity hire. I'm not quite as down on him as you are, Conor. I think, what he's been able to get out of a beat up offensive line. Derek Carr's gotten better every season. Finding Darren Waller. I think offensively he's made some moves that he should get credit for. But it just feels like he was brought in as like the celebrity hire, as opposed to, all right, who's the best guy that's gonna run this franchise? Because he got the entire keys to the kingdom, right? Like Mike Mayock's GM, because that's what his name tag says. But Gruden makes all those decisions. And so it just feels like, yeah, you hired a celebrity to take this job that may or may not have the skills.
This, to me, was the problem with the entire hiring process. And I think it's instructive for the rest of the league if you start to think about it, because one of my major gripes with the Gruden hire was that it made a mockery of the Rooney Rule, right? Mark Davis came out and said, I've wanted to make this hire for 2 years. So you're admitting that you did not consider the two minority candidates that you interviewed, and that you set up a sham interview process. And so I think, but that aside,
the Rooney Rule's been kind of like that for like most people, though, too.
For sure, right? But the Rooney Rule is set up for people like Mark Davis, who walk into these decisions with their mind made up. And if you go to like Rooney himself or Tony Dungy, who's been sort of this liaison for the Rooney Rule in the last few years, the point is to make you stop and think and make sure that you're making the right decision, and to listen to people with an open mind and say, maybe I'm wrong about this. This is where Mike Tomlin came from. The Steelers weren't going to hire Mike Tomlin, and they brought him in anyway, and he blew them away. And he's one of the 3 or 4 best coaches in the NFL. And I think that when that happened, Mark Davis was just so infatuated with Gruden that you just jump into bed without really considering how this is going to all work. And I mean, yeah, there are worse teams, there are worse situations right now, but certainly going into year 4 without a single playoff berth and really nothing that you can say is a hallmark of Raider football outside of Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs, and some of those guys are good, but I don't know if that's worth $100 million to me or even close to that.
Yeah, you got to wonder, like, if Gruden is worth $10 million a year, what's Belichick worth? Like $50 million a year? Like, it was a weird hire. And again, it all just comes back to like Mark just like loves John, and like that's, you know, part of it. It also goes to just leverage in general. Like if you were going to get Jon Gruden away from basically working 1 day a week for ESPN and making almost the same money to, you know, you ask any beat writers for the Raiders, like his car's there at 6 a.m. and his car's there at 8 p.m. Like for all his faults, he's putting the time in, you know, like to be able to drag someone out of coaching from TV, you're going to have to overpay. And I think as, you know, we're seeing like all these, you know, ex quarterbacks and coaches and their broadcasting paydays get higher and higher and higher. Like that's probably the thing that's going to be driving coach pay up higher than more than anything. It's just, that's who you're competing with now as major networks who are paying billions and billions of dollars for this product.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? It's like, you know, we've heard forever that the Raiders are a team that can't afford certain things, that can't, you know, do things like teams normally do them. And yet you have a fully guaranteed $100 million contract that's going to be basically impossible to get out of, you know, without a gigantic buyout. And so it's just interesting. It like juxtaposes oddly with what you would typically think about the Raiders, right? And they're a team that's kind of in a perpetual cost saving mode a little bit. And so, but Gruden is their one major expenditure. And if that's the case, and you believe that much in him, that's fine. But you can't go 4 years without getting anything out of that, you know? And I think that's what's really, you know, and, you know, there are diehard Gruden people out there. There are people that tell me I'm wrong at every step of the way, and maybe I am. And I'm willing to be wrong because he's such an electric person that if that team is good, that is so good for the NFL, and it is so good for us. Like, I would love that. I would love if the Raiders were good. But if not, like, I feel like you're just kind of, you know, sticking a pin in something that's already deflating, you know? And I think that that's going to be hard for people to realize. Like, if you go 4 years without making the playoffs now, if you're almost halfway into the contract with no playoffs, what do you say? Where do you point the fingers, and who's to blame at that point?
Yeah, it's always better the league when the bad guys are good, you know. It makes it more fun. We had Marcus Mosher on last week, and he kind of echoed some of our sentiments, saying that Gruden is an excellent coach and a terrible talent evaluator. What do you feel is the dynamic in that front office with Mayock and now Gus Bradley in there?
Yeah, so before he got the job, I talked to a bunch of people who played for him in Tampa at the end of his tenure there. And I think that they all echoed very similar things to what we're seeing now. He's impatient. He doesn't like developing young talent. He's very quick to swap out people for veterans that he knows are good, or veterans that he's seen on tape that's flashed to him. You know, when he had Jeff Garcia and he had them rolling in the playoffs, it was the first thing he did. He tried to go after Brett Favre. When he had Chris Sims, and that was the highest rookie quarterback that he'd ever tried to develop, what did he do? He pivoted to somebody else. He had, you know, all these veterans in the quarterback room trying to get to somebody else. And, you know, I think that's really the problem is, I don't think that there's any time for that trust to develop. You know, you don't go in there thinking, okay, this guy's going to take care of me and I'm going to be a better player. It's okay. You know, if I'm a tight end and I'm not good, you know, he's going to find a 38-year-old guy to just sign off the street to replace me because he likes him better. And I think that that's a problem. You know, John is a really flashy guy. He sees, you know, veteran talent, already developed talent. And unlike Bill Belichick, I think he has a trouble putting the puzzle pieces together like that. Like, you can run a good franchise that way, but not if you don't put it all together the right way.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up tight end because they have an amazing tight end in Darren Waller, and they still signed a 900-year-old Jason Witten to come in at tight end. It's like $3 million to be a team leader. Like, what?
Well, they had a great backup too. I mean, Foster Moreau, he had like the year before they signed Witten, he had 5 red zone touchdowns. Like, he was no slouch as a backup tight end.
He's an above average tight end playing backup to Waller, and they still signed Jason Witten
and gave him all the snaps.
Yeah, it's nuts. So it's like when I think of like, all right, what's Jon Gruden's like strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, I think he runs a pretty good offense. I think he's a pretty decent play caller. But it's like you mentioned, the problem is he's just a terrible talent evaluator. Like, it goes back to me, like, it's the curse of Rich Gannon. Like, in 1999, he picked up Rich Gannon, who was in his mid-30s, made him an NFL MVP, right? Went to the went to the Super Bowl the year after, Jon Gruden left, but like, he just made Rich Gannon just became phenomenal. And he's just been trying to replicate that ever since. It's like, think of the quarterbacks that he has brought in. Thank God Derek Carr was here before Jon Gruden was. Like, think of the quarterbacks he's brought in. Nathan Peterman, who nobody wants. He traded for A.J. McCarron, who's terrible. Give Marcus Mariota like the highest paid backup, a contract that's so big they can't even trade him now. It's like he's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer, and the only quarterback he's got is the one that he didn't pick up.
Yeah, there's no evidence to bear out him being a quarterback whisperer. Like I love that some people can have that title and sort of manifest it into existence, but there's just no evidence that he's a quarterback whisperer, and there never has been. And I think what's interesting is, like, and I pointed out in the column yesterday was, maybe you like PFF, maybe you don't. He grades out as a top 10 to 12 quarterback almost every year. Football Outsiders, all these other places. Like, he's good enough. He's Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019. He's good enough to get you to the Super Bowl. And he's crazy affordable. He's making no money compared to the rest of the quarterbacks in the league. Yeah. Why aren't you striking? Like, this is the time to go. This is the time to win. And I'm just surprised, I guess, at how it's working out. I mean, I would figure that at some point you're able to put the pieces together here. But if you really are that quarterback whisperer, let's maximize Derek Carr. Let's make him better. And he's played better, but I don't know. I just don't see how this is all working in conjunction with one another. There's no synergy.
What do you think, if you had to look in from the outside, what do you think is his short-term plan and I don't see a long-term plan, but what do you see the roster building? Is it a money thing with the Raiders? Is that why, some of these questionable cuts? What do you see the issue?
Well, I think what you're hearing now, right, is that, the offensive line wasn't as good as everybody's saying anyway. And so, you have to start fresh at the position, and that's fine. But what's your argument then? You got rid of Khalil Mack to get these young, talented players in there. And so what are you going to do with a great wide receiver and a great running back when you have nobody blocking for them, And, is Derek Carr going to regress? Absolutely. I think that any quarterback, just ask his brother, how hard is it to play in front of a non-existent offensive line? Jon Gruden couldn't build a top 10 unit with the most expensive offensive line in football. What makes you think he's going to be able to do it overnight in the draft and on the back end of free agency? I'm just not that optimistic about how that goes. So what does the long-term plan look like? I really don't know. Like, is he signing more guys like Yannick Ngakoue, who, he can find a little bit of a market inefficiency and plug and play these veterans? That's fine. But, like, you're no different than the Raiders from 2005 to 2000, however long before Reggie McKenzie got there. You're just, kind of just scraping the bottom of the barrel and hoping that you find something that works.
Yeah, the offensive line situation's still, like, as of right now, like Wednesday afternoon, like, it's all moving. Like, Rodney Hudson, he was supposed to be cut. Now we're told he could be traded. Denzel Good got re-signed. We don't know what's going on with, Richie Incognito. Like, it's all kind of in flux. It could pan out to be pretty decent if they keep Incognito. Obviously, Colton Miller still at left tackle. The backup center that's backed up Rodney Hudson, Andre Jones, the staff has been very, very high on him. So right now, I'm with you. It looks like you're just, like, gutting this great line that was supposed to be the anchor of your football team. It could end up all right. But the biggest problem, obviously, with the Raiders has been the defense. Like, the offense has been doing great. Run game, pass game, other than red zones, it's been a great offense. If the plan is to scrape $30 million off the line and throw it into a pass rush, I could see it. But again, it goes back to your point. Like, you develop this line for a reason. And then the second it kind of gets a little shady for you, you're like, all right, start over.
Yeah, which is why, I think it just goes back to him being very reactionary. He's a reactionary coach, and he always has been. Look at, they were at some point involved in discussions for Tom Brady, and tried to dip their toe in the water there. Like, I just don't think that there's a thing that can pass by his point of view that doesn't grab his attention, and he tries to hold on to it. And, if you have a bad year with the offensive line, that's another thing. It's like, okay, well, then let's just throw it all out the window. And you're right. Maybe it's not as bad as we think it is, but even if it's as good as we think it is, you're still depending on, like, a 37-year-old Richie Incognito to have, another plus season and not get injured. And, maybe that's possible. Offensive linemen are playing later into their careers, but, this isn't set up to be sustainable. And you can win now by holding on to these guys, but they're not holding on to these guys. And so I just don't know. Like, people are coming and going at a rate that to your earlier question, like, I don't know what that means for the long-term plan. A lot of teams, you can see the long-term plan coming into fruition, but this everything seems to complicate it, as the further we get into it.
That's the most frustrating thing, I think, for RJ and myself doing this show. It's like we're just kind of like sit along for the ride. Okay, what's going to happen today? I mean, in one sense, it's good. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, but we can't really build a lot of continuity in our shows because it's like, well, we don't even know what's going on. I have a 3 free agent ask, 2 in the secondary, 1 on the offensive line, and then 1 ask as far as a first round pick. So if you had 2 free agent signings in the secondary, actually 3 free agent signings that you want for the Raiders and a first round pick, what do you feel is going to be the most bang for their buck?
Oof, that's a good question.
Put him on the spot there, Juan.
Hot
seat right away.
We're doing here.
And
I don't know about right away. We've been doing 20 minutes.
And just as we're talking, Rodney Hudson just got traded to the Cardinals. So there you go. They ended up not cutting him. So
there it is.
We get back.
Did it say what we got for him?
I don't
Raiders,
see anything yet.
So Mike Garofalo was the tweet you saw, right?
Yeah.
For a swap of draft picks. Okay.
So my free agent guys have to be in the secondary.
No, any 3 free agent. I mean, I have a couple of mine are in the secondary.
Okay. So if I'm looking at what's left, I mean, I think that you get Jadeveon Clowney because, people come in and expect the South Carolina play against Michigan every time. And that's the player that we've come to expect. But like, he's a great run defender. Like, he's an excellent top 5 run defender every year. And so you get that guy, you hold that edge, I like a guy like him. I like a guy like Aldon Smith who can do the same thing. They can make you functional against the run basically overnight without a ton of investment, and if I were to pick another guy, I mean, you're going to need something to open up you're going to need.
It's kind of like a best safety available type of thing. I feel like, because like the DBs are so young, right? It's like, second year player, third year player. Jonathan Abrams, basically a second year player because he was hurt his entire rookie season.
You spend the money on Anthony Harris. I mean,
is there a reason why he's still out there? Is it the money? He wants too much money?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's, I think there's still some guys that are holding out for, that position finally got to a place of, where there was a premium on it. And I think some of those guys are holding out for that money. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple guys try to linger until like July and try to get that money and wait for an injury or, some sort of maybe the draft. And some of those guys might hit it big, but I don't think it'll be that long on Anthony Harris. I think he'll go at some point. He's a great player.
Yeah. What do you make of just kind of like, so the problem with the Raiders is like, we've had guys play in the Raiders, let them go, and they played great somewhere else. We get these expensive free agents, Corey Littleton, Carl Nassib, like we get these great defensive, Trayvon Mullen, and it's like they fall apart here. Is there something like in the water in Vegas? Is it cultural? Like, is this going Jon Gruden? Like, what do you make of this? Like, just swinging and missing constantly, and just players just can't thrive there.
Well, look at Cleveland, right? It took somebody to come in and to basically tell the owner to get out of the building and say, like, I'm going to take all the rugs outside and we're going to sweep all the dust out. Like, we really have to look at the way that we do things from a business perspective. And the Browns, like, give them credit. I mean, Andrew Berry and the guys that are there now, literally after everything they do, they send out a survey to the entire staff and they take it back and they incorporate what everybody wants to do. The players are involved in all this. Like, everybody touches this and they feel welcome and they feel like they're all part of this. And I just think that LA or Las Vegas, Oakland, they've never had that, that real unifier as a coach or as a general manager to come in and say, like, we're the Raiders and everybody's kind of obsessed with that idea, but let's clean that out. Like, let's start over from day one and let's actually put together like a functional plan here. How are we going to get better? What are the steps to getting there? And I just don't think that they've ever given themselves the chance to do that. Gruden theoretically was the guy to do that, right? You give him a 10-year contract and you think that there was an incremental plan, but in year 4, like we've said, I don't think that that's on tap just yet.
I mean, at least Al Davis had his like conciliaries.
Yeah.
A group of people. It's like now it's just Mark Davis sitting down like, all right, John, do whatever you want to do. And I mean, I
I
don't know
bet you
how
there's a
much
couple PF Chang servers that he gets a lot of advice from, Mark and
he
John.
loves that PF
In all
Chang.
fairness, sometimes it's TGI Friday, sometimes it's PF Chang's, but he's listening.
But it's always in the van, the conversion van.
Yes, exactly. So if you're, obviously if you're not Mark Davis, but if you are an NFL owner and this has been what Jon Gruden's done with your franchise, right? Not gone to the playoffs in 3 seasons, but technically has improved each season, right? 4-12, 7-9, 8-8, developed Derek Carr, found Darren Waller. There's plenty of bad. There's some good sprinkled in there as well. Is he already fired if you're an owner? Are you saying, hey, next season you got to prove it? Or are you believing in what's happening? Like, obviously you're not believing what's happening, but like, what if you're the owner? What are you doing?
It's an interesting question. I would say that if I'm a patient person, which I'm not by nature, I would say, here's the rest of the money that we have. Like, do what you're going to do. Let's plan on this being a 1-year contract, essentially, and give the Chiefs your best shot. Like,
Okay.
let's see if you can make inroads in this division, since you have gotten better every year. This is it. Like, playoffs or bust. I need you to take 1 out of 2 from the Chiefs. Like, I need you to be like you, and he has. That's not something he hasn't done before. But I need you to be legitimate right now, and we need to be in the wild card and performing well enough. To stay and to come back. And just thinking of that in mind, like, I just think he's gotten an incredible opportunity. I mean, look at Anthony Lynn. He developed Justin Herbert, and the guy didn't have a single day of practice as a starting quarterback, turned him into the offensive rookie of the year, and then he gets fired. There are a lot of coaches that show developmental promise and don't get the chance to come back, and so here he is for year 4. But I mean, let's be real. I mean, we're in this for the long haul, and Raider fans loved it at the beginning. I think the majority of them, and I'm not sure that this is going to be as fun of a game, after year 4, year 5, year 6, if they're still not, reaching the postseason.
Check out his fantastic work on si.com. You can follow him on Twitter as well, at Conor Orr, 2 R's, ORR. Conor, this was great. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Conor. Appreciate it.
Yeah.